Michelle would have been so proud. Thank you, Maureen. This is a time now for the sharing of memories of friends and family, of you all. And so we're going to open up the floor for those who would like to share memories of Michelle.
Too short. I've known Michelle since we were probably in third grade. She lived around the corner from me, so frequently after school we'd walk home and she'd come to my house and hang out and walk around the corner and repeat over and over. And the group of us here today have grew up with her and knew her, and I know she shaped who I am today with her strong sense of justice and of always trying to help and of empathy and caring. And I would not be who I am today if I did not have that friendship. And unfortunately, after college, we weren't as close as we were when we were kids. But I will always remember watching Star Wars with her every Friday and dressing up and fighting with lightsabers and doing a whole bunch of really silly things that we have, unfortunately, evidence of as pictures. I will miss her dearly, and I know that we who grew up with her will miss her dearly, and I thank her because of her, we've all reconnected, and the best thing that we can do is, in her memory, is maintain those friendships that we've had since we were children. So in her passing, she's done something beautiful for us, so I thank her.
Thank you.
If I use these Kleenexes, I think Michelle's going to come down here and punch me right in the arm. My name is Russ Bourne. I was Michelle's coworker, her supervisor in the public defender's office, and most importantly, her friend. I knew Michelle as Rathkamp most of the time, because you people know she loved that word, Rathkamp. And there's a lot of cliches about shooting stars that burn brightly, touching everything, and then going out, and then leaving it blank and cold. I don't like to think of Rathkamp in those terms. I think of her more as kind of a warm, inviting glow, something that's going to stay with me forever. Sorry about that. I know there's people out there right now looking at me going, what the shit? Russ never cries, and I'm not. Like I just got something in my eyeball. That's all it is. But I never met a more caring, warm, and selfless individual. She never quit. She got results for people and mitigation for clients that I could never get. And I know that a lot of others couldn't get that either. But you know what? This doesn't mean that Michelle was meek or quiet or laid back. Rathkamp was never quiet. And I'm telling you, she had a wicked, mischievous sense of humor. And if you were on the other end of that, you got skewered quite often. And so being her supervisor, I had the honor of being skewered quite a few times by Michelle. I'm going to show you what she would get to do is sometimes she would get you to admit things that you really didn't want to admit. And you're like, oh, okay. But then she would mercilessly tease you with it later and bring it up at the most inopportune times when you thought it was all forgotten. One of the low points in her life, and I'm just going to tell you this, but it turned out to be good, was she's in the trial groups and she was observing a trial that her supervisor was doing just to observe. And all of a sudden they noticed that she was at the counsel table and she had actually nodded off. Now, the person who was doing the cross-examination, I might have nodded off, to be quite honest with you, because not everybody's interested in doing that. But it had nothing to do with her. She, at the time, had a sleep apnea problem that nobody really understood, and she hadn't slept for days. So as a supervisor, I was at a supervisor meeting, and they all were all excited about, what are we going to do? Should we do this? Should we do that? And I said, well, just give her to me for a while. We were down in that court that they talked about, EDC, Early Disposition Court, down in the basement. Now, I loved EDC court. I was getting close to retirement, and it meant every day you could be in court, which was a lot of fun. I had done murder cases, capital cases, I didn't care. But EDC was a great time because every day was different and exciting. And Michelle loved that. And so we got her down there, and Sullivan and Emerson, other lawyers that are here, we talked to her about what her problem was, and we convinced her, you got to have surgery. You got to get your tonsils out. Well, if you're a young kid, I know there's a couple in the front row here, hey, tonsils out's nothing. You go in there, they give you ice cream, you're out of there in a day, and you're feeling great. Well, when you're an adult, it's a little more scary. It really is. So we kind of talked her into having surgery, and she did. And she came back from surgery, and as her supervisor, I had to bring her to my office, and I wanted to talk to her about how the surgery went. Now, she already knew who I was, and I knew who she was, and we had this kind of friendly, teasing, everything relationship, and she loved to get on me whenever she could. And so what happened was I sat down with her, and our offices in EDC is like my office, literally. I'm the supervisor, and it goes from here to about here. And then somebody else's office is from here to here. And I think Sullivan was like right over here across the aisle, and Emerson was like right over there on the aisle. And whenever you sit in your office, it'll probably ever be heard. So I tried to be quiet. And she sat down, and I said, well, how'd the surgery go? And then I knew I was in trouble. Because she sat down, she got that funny little smile on her face. And I think you know what I'm talking about. And then she shook her head like that, and she goes, you're going to laugh. And I'm like, no. And then inside I'm going, you got to be a supervisor, Russ. You're not going to laugh. I go, I promise you, I'm not going to laugh. I'm not going to laugh. She goes, you're going to laugh. And then she got that little like rough kind of giggle she had, or whatever you want to call it. A little bit satanic, a little bit. So then she says to me, well, here's what happened. She goes, I had my adenoids taken out. And I go like, yes. She goes, I had my uvula trimmed. And I looked at her and I go, you had what? And she goes, you know, the uvula. And then this is when I knew I was in trouble. She looks at me and she goes, you know where that's at, don't you? And I'm going, I said, yeah, I know what it is. It's in the back of your throat. It's like this. She goes, yes, they trimmed it. I said, I never heard of anybody doing that. At which point, she said to me, well, they did. And all I can think in my brain was, when I was young, we used to see these cartoons, and maybe you still see them sometimes. A cartoon where when somebody yodels or screams or something like that, and they like zoom into the back of the throat, and all you see all these things wiggling in the back of the throat or something like that. Well, I started thinking about that. And I started thinking about Michelle. And so I had to bite my lip. And so I'm sitting there like that, biting my lip, saying, no, I'm not going to laugh. I'm not laughing. And I said, well, what else? I said, what did the doctor say about your tonsils? And she just sat there and she goes like this. She goes, She goes, he said they're the most humongous tonsils he's ever seen in his life. And she goes, you know, we Rathkamps, we don't do anything small. And I'm trying to hold it together when she says to me, and he wants to put them in beakers or something and send them someplace for study. Well, that was it. Because all I can think about was these two giant tonsils sitting someplace that says donated by Michelle. And then she got the best of it, though, on that one, which she always does. Because after we kind of settled down and after I kind of tried to compose myself, she got up, she walked to the office, opened the door, and like I said, all the officers like that, and there was an attorney or a clerk up there, I don't know who it was. And they said to her, what are you guys laughing about? And she got that snide smile on her face. She goes, Russ made fun of my tonsils. Good supervisor, huh? The other thing I wanted to let you know too, and it's just a little more take on the incident where she had the fight. And now I know some people say she didn't have the fight, but I have to tell you, it happened exactly like he said it did, except for just a couple things, which she never let me forget. Michelle was very good with mentally ill clients, people who had some mentally ill struggles. This client, we thought might have been mentally ill struggles, but in reality, he was a meth user. He was coming down from meth, and he was just pissed off. He was mad. But I figured, okay, she can still take care of him. This is a good client for her to talk to, be quiet, be calm with, blah, 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 blah. So I personally assigned her to him. I said, okay, listen, this might be a little trouble, but I think you can handle it. I'm doing a nice thing for her. This is her kind of client. Well, shoot me. Because I was back there, not right there, but all of a sudden I hear the commotion. I see the sheriffs running back and forth. I'm like, what the hell is going on back here? And like a few minutes later, I see Michelle come walking out. She's holding on to her jaw. And I'm like, what happened? And the sheriff's going, he punched her, he hit her, blah, 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 they hit her. And the sheriff's all running in there to put the guy in chains and blah, blah, blah. So I take Michelle, I bring her back to my office. And I said to her, I said, are you okay? All right. And she's holding it. And it was a little swollen. And I said, oh, man. I said, what happened? She described it just the way she described it, except she forgot to tell everybody this part. I said to her, well, what did you do? She goes, I'm a Rathkamp. She said, I pegged him one. He's never going to miss with the Rathkamp again. And to her credit, she didn't want to file charges against him. But I have to tell you, we were talking to the sheriffs, and for a minute there, the client wanted to press charges against Michelle. But the sheriffs, all they had to do to say to the client was, so you want to file charges against a woman attorney, and you're going to say she punched you and hurt you? You want to be in custody when you have to go and they pull you and people hear that? No, it never happened. It just kind of went bye-bye. But that's not the worst part of that story. I just have to finish it off. There was an end to that story, and I don't know if Emerson and Sullivan remember it. But so what happened was that day, I looked at her, she had a little bruise. I decided I'd take her to an emergency room because Michelle, no, I'm fine. So I took her to an emergency room. We sat there for really almost 4 hours until after work. We finally got in, I think it actually was like 7 o'clock at night. We finally got in. They did the x-ray, she's fine. I took her out to dinner. Of course I paid for dinner. She took a punch for our office, right? So then I got her home. And the next day I made my report. I told her, stay home, take a day off. Nope. Next day she was back at work. She was right there back at work. And of course the story started out was, yeah, Russ assigned me some crazy client who was violent. But that wasn't the worst part, because I turned in all my reports, did what I was supposed to do, and at the time, the office, and I think Sullivan and Emerson remember this, was starting to give awards to people who went above and beyond. Really, the county was doing it actually. It was a $25 gift certificate and a little certificate. So I put her name in for the award. I figured you take a punch for that. For the office, you deserve that $25. Unfortunately, I guess it was more for administrative people, which I never considered myself to be, but I didn't put my name in. About a week and a half later, I get this nice letter saying, Mr. Bourne, you've been awarded $25. True story, for going above and beyond. And as I'm sitting there reading, I'm like, what? No, this can't be true. Sure enough. So all you people who know Rathkamp, you know that I had the pleasure of about 3 days later of bringing her into my office and letting her know that I want you to know I really appreciate what you did, taking a punch for the office, and they gave me a $25 True story. At which point, of course, Rathkamp just started laughing, bouncing up and down, and said, "You know you're taking me to dinner." I said, "Well, I'll take you to dinner." And she goes, "Oh, no, you're going to take me to a lot of dinners." And this is true. Ever since that date, I would see her once a year, maybe twice a year, to go see her. She never paid for anything that I went with her again. Because if we started to talk price, even if there were other people, up would come, "I took a punch for you." Now, there was one other thing I wanted to talk about. I had the privilege of going to Weight Watchers with Michelle. Now, yeah, you can laugh because we were both decided that, damn, we knew a couple of attorneys in the office, 3 women in the office, Jennifer, and my wife said don't name them, but I'll name them. No, I won't name the other 2, but they inspired us. They inspired us. They had lost this great weight at Weight Watchers. Well, neither of us, we sucked at losing weight. And what I did was I always wanted to go for lunch, and I paid for a lot because I was a senior lawyer, I was making money. So I always was buying a lunch. So we decided we're going to do Weight Watchers. And we did do it. 4 weeks in a row. 4 weeks in a row, we went to a weekly meeting. And on the 4th meeting, we both had gained 3 pounds. True story. And we looked at each other and we said, that's it. We went out and we had ice cream to celebrate. That was the end of Weight Watchers. The other thing, last things I want to say is, one, I was really, really proud of her as an attorney, but I was proud of her as a person. She gave of herself to people that I've never, ever met anybody, and this is really true after all these years, never met anybody as selfless as her. When I found out about Michelle's illness, I was extremely sad. What happened was I had just texted her 2 weeks before, and she had a fibroid surgery, and my niece had a fibroid surgery, and I talked to her, and I said, "Hey, my niece just had that. Everything went out great, blah, 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 blah." And then about a couple days later, she sent me a thing back saying, "I'm going to be back at work in 2 weeks." And so I was going to talk to her about going out to lunch, doing something with her. And a week later, I got a call from her sister telling me that Michelle was going to die. And I have to tell you, when I first heard about her illness, I was extremely, extremely sad. And then her death made me extremely frickin', and in behalf of Michelle, fucking angry. Fucking angry. Because there's a lot of other people I met in my life who I would have really liked to have them go that way and still have Michelle with me. It's just the way life is. But now I think about her as a person, what she accomplished, what she cared for, and the things she stood up for and believed in. And I have to tell you that as a final thing, I think her spirit warms me. I think her spirit challenges me not to be retired really anymore. And her spirit inspires me. It inspires me to do something I believe in and work hard at. So, yeah, I'm going to miss her.
Thank you. Anyone else?
My name's Jesse. I worked with Michelle for a while. I have to tell you, I honestly debated whether or not to wear the loudest t-shirt I own for this. I knew she would get a kick out of it. I didn't think it was appropriate. The best I have is a sarcastic mask, so. Oh, it's upside down?
What's it say?
Oh. It says I forgot my mask. Anyway.
Leave it off while you're talking.
Leave it off while I'm talking. All right. When I think of what Michelle means to me, I actually think of a story she's not involved in. I was having lunch with a couple of my coworkers, and another attorney came in and said he was trying to figure us all out. And there was one attorney he couldn't figure out, but he pointed at my friend Todd and said, "Todd, I got you pegged. You would give your shirt off your back to help someone no matter what." And he says, "Jesse, I've got you pegged. You just want the state to stick it as far as it'll go every time." And Michelle was both of those things perfectly, only she could do it with a smile. I do it well, I can't do it with a smile like her. I thought of 100 things I could say. I'm sure Phil, you knew Michelle so much better than I did. You could probably give that whole eulogy again and say something different. But the main thing I wanted to come up here, and it is a joke, but it'll get serious later, is to apologize to Michelle because I promised she could borrow my copy of the Highlander soundtrack, and she never did. And I know what many of you were thinking, Jesse, the Highlander soundtrack was never commercially released. How can you have a copy? Well, what had happened is that I was at Comic-Con, a Comic-Con that Michelle could not afford to go to, even though I offered to buy her a ticket. There was a guy there selling rare CDs, and they were CDs, I don't know if they were bootlegs or it was a special thing in Europe. And so, amongst other things, he had a completely unknown, unreleased copy of the Blade Runner soundtrack and a copy of the Highlander soundtrack, which again is not supposed to exist. Due to a commercial dispute with Queen and the label and the movie studio, it was never commercially released, even though it had some very popular songs on it. So I told Michelle about this, and her eyes got real wide. And I don't know if she was a fan of the movie or Queen or both, but she was like, "I have to borrow that." And I said, "Okay, I'll bring it in." And unfortunately, I never did. Now, I'm bringing that up for 3 reasons. 1, I'm a trial attorney, and we're taught to talk in 3s. 2, so that I know Michelle is up there right now saying, "Jesse's bringing up the Highlander soundtrack at my memorial. What the hell?" And so that you'll all go home and say, "Yes, the service was nice, but some weird guy got up and started talking about the Highlander soundtrack." And that'll always stick with you. And that is Michelle's sense of humor in a nutshell right there. But in conclusion, the 3rd reason is that was like 10 years ago. And I was thinking about that when I heard Michelle pass. And I realized, you try to think of happy things. So I was like, oh, I never loaned her the Highlander soundtrack. And then I realized that it had been 10 years at least. And it hadn't come up because I hadn't seen her in a while. And I didn't even know she was sick. And that's how long it had been since I had spoken to her. So, to end with a cliche, she would be thrilled to know that so many people care about her, looking at all of you. But it's always important to keep in touch with people who mean something to you, because one day, before you know it, 10 years have gone by, and obviously I'd spoken to her since then, and then she's gone. And so, anyway, always remember to try and keep in touch with people. And I'm kind of fading out here. But anyway, yes, here's the mask correctly. I forgot my mask.
Any other friends and family like to share memories?
Hi, I just wanted to come up. I just wanted to come up. I'm part of that group that grew up with Michelle when we were younger. And I don't remember a time when she wasn't my friend. But I wanted to share a couple funny stories. Like this summer we spent, we watched Star Wars 30 times in one summer. And playing lightsabers was not a joke, like that legit happened. And I also had one story I want to share is I remember one time on a bus, we were on a field trip, like 5th grade. We got to go somewhere in the bus. It was amazing. And we were sitting next to each other, and everything we talked about, we completely agreed. I was like, I love this author. And she's like, I love this author. And I was like, I love these movies, like The Last Unicorn. And she's like, I love The Last Unicorn. So like everything we agreed on. And it got to the point where it was almost like, when you're a kid, you're suspicious. You're like, they're just copying me because I'm just so cool. You know what I mean? So at one point I made like a weird random comment that was completely opposite of me. And she looked at me and she was like, I don't think that at all. And it was so interesting because she was so true to her convictions, even as a kid. She just always just was who she was, and she had no problem stating that fact. I love the fact that we did mock trial together in high school. I did it for an opportunity to perform, because I am a performer, and she did it because she loved the law, and we had a case that we were doing for a mock trial about a rape case. And I remember her anger as we went through these testimonies. It was a mock trial. It was basically a script. It wasn't a real case. But her anger as we went through this case about this woman who was raped was very real for her, because she, once again, that justice, that's not fair. And in high school, she was someone who went to school every day. She never missed a day. I was sick all the time. I didn't care. But she was there all the time. But her senior year, she chose not to go to school one day because she went in because she had witnessed an accident where she stayed with the woman after that accident for 2 or 3 hours after school in the Arizona heat because she was concerned about her, and then she didn't get the opportunity to have perfect attendance because she wanted to be there for that trial. That's who she was. I don't know. I haven't talked to her honestly since high school because life, you go your separate ways. But the more I reflect back on her, I'm so glad to hear she never changed, that she's just who she is. And I just wanted to one more thing. Last night, a bunch of us from elementary school and high school got together, and we're looking through old yearbooks. And in my yearbook, in 7th grade, everyone's writing things like, have a great summer, see you next year, all the cliches. And what she writes is, Sarah, you're one of my best friends, and you truly inspired me, and I'm grateful that we had the chance. What 7th grader does that? She was an old soul, and I know that she's eternally here with us, and I'm grateful for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Family, friends of Michelle, like to share memories?
I'll warn you up front, I'm a very emotional person, so if I cry, it's just who I am. I'm sort of part of the group that grew up with Michelle, but I didn't meet her until high school. So they all went to the same elementary school together, and I kind of met everybody after. But I was in a lot of classes with Michelle, and I was constantly floored by this girl that just had these, she knew who she was before anybody else, even thought about worrying about who they were. And I was constantly blown away by how feisty and compassionate she could be, and how wickedly, fiercely funny she could be, and then in the same moment, comfort you if you're having a bad day. She was like this dichotomy of Michelle. And I'm so grateful I got to know her. Like Sarah, I kind of lost touch after high school. So I didn't know she'd become a public defender. And I was like, well, of course Michelle would do that. Of course. It just made total sense to me. And I just wanted to share my experiences with her. I don't have any funny specific stories or anything, but just that I met her when we were 14. And I don't know a lot of 14-year-olds that have the kind of passion she does about a lot of the projects we did in humanities. We learned about different cultures, and she was fiercely passionate about the atrocities committed towards women in other countries and different things, and stuff I hadn't even heard about. I was like, oh my gosh, that's horrible. But Michelle was so informed and so passionate, like Sarah, I'm so glad that never changed, because that to me was just who Michelle was. And I'm grateful I got to know her for a small window of my life, because I do think she definitely influenced my sense of justice and fighting for what you really truly deep down know is right. And I hope I can be a better example of that going forward than, maybe I have been in the past. So I'm just grateful that Michelle was part of my life for those crazy high school years.
Let's give it one more moment. It's scary to come up to this microphone.
You were like speaking through Michelle to me, because one of the things Michelle always did for all of us who are Rathkampites was to take all the fear away from you whenever you needed that moment. She was such an undying force for justice and for good, but also for making each one of us better who spent any time with her. I'm RJ, by the way. Nice to meet a lot of you. Nice to see some old friends and familiar faces here. We came up together in RCC, which has been described as the basement that seems to be a really deep, dark place where nobody can breathe and everybody seems to have trouble finding their footing. And Michelle was one of those people who was like the constant, the staple, the person that every time you were around, you knew you'd feel a little safer. You'd feel a little more comfortable. The day was going to be a little easier. There are so many moments, and it's impossible to articulate how each one of those made you feel. But one of the words that comes to mind is just safety. You were always safe in Michelle's embrace. She always had the right thing to say. Even if she was skewering you with sarcasm, she still knew how to lift you up in every moment. She knew how to make you feel like, you know what, the day is going to be a bit better because I'm here for you, no matter what. And so one of the things that I haven't heard as much about today, but I wanted to share are the Rathkamp hugs. And maybe I missed a couple of people talking about them, but the Rathkamp hugs were something special. If you had a client, like she often encountered, that had mental illness and literally beat you down, no one can complain about what Michelle went through, she would take you in a private moment and give you a hug and just embrace you. And you knew in that moment, everything was just better. You were in a different world. You were in Michelle's world for a minute, and it just made you feel so good and so safe. And there's no real way to think about, many of all the people that we love and connect with, all the friendships that we have, there are just so few people who can wrap their arms around you and then just let you know this is going to be a good moment. And it is, and it always was. And so from time to time, I'd call Michelle up and say, I need a Rathkamp hug. We need to get together today. I'm having a bad one. I need a Rathkamp hug. And she knew she was going to wrap those paws around me and make me feel better. And I tried to do the same, but for those of you who know, it's just impossible to give as much as Michelle gave. Every moment of every day. And I can't think of any times where she wasn't giving some part of herself to someone else. It even made you feel, after spending time with her, whether it was a lunch or going into court, like you were being selfish somehow because you can't keep up with her level of giveness. You can't reciprocate that much. And that's one of the things I really want to give back to the world, is just a little bit more love on Michelle's behalf, because she gave that to us. Fight a little bit harder in those times where you want to take a break or moment off, because she didn't take those moments off. Phil, I know she made you a better person for sure. You've grown over the last 10 years. But she did. She fought so darn hard for every single person she was with. And that includes you. That includes you any moment you had. So thank you, Michelle. I miss you, and I love you, and I won't forget those hugs.
Thank you. Would anyone like to come forward for Michelle's sake and share?
So I may not have even known Michelle for a decade, but when I first met her, I think we had a lot of fun together. We painted cups, but the second time that I got to see her, I just really felt like we actually got a connection, because we shared a lot in common. We had a lot of fun together the second time because we were at Dave & Buster's, and she even gave me and my brother TJ her tickets so that way we could buy better prizes, and I just really loved that connection. And I really saw that animal in person whenever I got to meet her dog Kitsune. We really had Like, I just feel like we all had a really strong connection, and the Rathkamps are really great people. And I just have to say, I just really love Michelle. And whenever I heard that she was gonna die, like, I was very upset because we were such close friends, and it was very unfortunate. But at least we will always know that she'll be there for us.
We're going to go forward in this order of service to the closing portion, which is a very brief message of hope and a closing prayer. And then the family invites you to a meal, which is important to Michelle, to share a meal, as you've heard from many of the testimonies here today. A message of hope. You see, hope is displayed in Michelle's life. Each of our lives have been improved as a result of Michelle. You hear that testimony after testimony. Not just in the embrace, but in the way that she impacted you, us. And so this brief message of hope is to have you consider that you are not to leave here today without being changed, influenced by Michelle and her life. It's not a life in vain. It's a life that has empowered many and will continue unto that end. And so I want to give you an example of how we can summarize Michelle's life. A profound sense of justice is what I've heard, and I've heard many different summaries. I'm going to give you another aspect or summary of her life, that which is love. You see, I can give you the example of when she was studying for the bar, and she had many, many time hacks or deadlines which she had to make. And she was on her way to one of those. She was going to be late. She didn't make it in time. And then she has, as you know, this city is filled with, you have that homeless person with the sign, thirsty, need water. Michelle is the type of person to be late to her own hurt in order to help someone in need. And that's exactly what she did. She turns around in heavy traffic. She gets that water and she gives it to that person, which many of us become numb to, haven't we? We're kind of numb to it. We see it so much. But yet, Michelle's heart is so large that she did not become numb at all. This is Michelle. You can summarize her life as love. And so in this message of hope, I wanted to just share 3 brief things with you. And it's all about love. It's all about Michelle. I want you to consider love imaged. You see, her name, her very name means who is like Elohim, as it is in the original. It comes from the Hebrew. But you could translate that variously. You could translate it who is like infinite love. And you see, it's meant to be a rhetorical question. It's meant to be like, who could be greater than infinite love? That's what her name meant, and that's what her life was. Who could really be greater than the love which she showed? It is so great and the heart so large. How would you define infinite love? It's been variously defined. Perhaps we could define it this way. Greater love hath no one than this, to lay down their life for a friend. And this is something which is very easily exemplified in her life. As her father started to decline in health, what did Michelle do? She laid down her life, moved in with mom and dad, and only they were able to keep the house because of her love, compassion, care. How is your life imaging love today? You see, infinite love is sacrifice. It's selflessness. That's a word used by one of the testimonies here today. Michelle was selfless. So often we're not. So often we're selfish. Perhaps Michelle is here telling you today, be selfless as you leave these doors. You see, love is not only imaged, it's also intellectual. You see, love requires knowledge of the object loved. You think about something you can hold in your hand, and if you can say you love that thing, you must have a knowledge of it. This is something which Michelle did so often through her gifts. You heard from the family. There's a bunch of gifts even now in the garage awaiting for you all. Because she thought of you. She held you out in her hand and she said, I love this person, so I'm going to get them that book about alcohol because they got an alcohol problem. And she would get it and put it away, and she would know right time to bring it to you. This was Michelle displaying through love of you how we ought to be. We ought to be love intellectual, a love knowing one another enough to be able to give gifts filled with that knowledge of one another in compassion. So infinite love requires also a legal loveliness, and her life was filled with this as you think about her as a public defense attorney. And as some of you from high school could think about her in the mock trials and the other instances where she gets to display a sense of profound justice. You see, we must be lovely to infinite love. And lovely requires that we have a legal loveliness. You can see this out in creation. You can see this in the legal profession. If you're not right with the law, well, you're not considered lovely. And you're marked. You're given that awful F word, felon. And everything's changed about you. But you see, in Michelle, it was different. For her, she would impute. It's that word that means she transfers to that person who might have that awful word attached to their name rather lovely. And she would treat them that way. She would treat them with her hugs, her personality, with all that she was for them in their defense even, as one which was worthy than more perhaps than they were worthy of. She always made sure due process was had. That's legal loveliness, imputed. This is a part of being selfless. You can't do that. It's not normal to our natures to do that. We want to label people. You see it in the atrocities in other nations and some in our nation as well. But she looked past those things and imputes a loveliness where perhaps there was very little. Do you see others as lovely, even when they don't deserve it? Michelle did. We can think about love imaged and love intellectual, but there's also love infinite as well. And I want to briefly give you hope through this avenue of all that Michelle's life shows us and displays for us. This is something especially for us to take home. You see, like Michelle, infinite love gave a gift. Jesus of Nazareth. Do you know him? Like Michelle, infinite love provided legal loveliness. There was an imputation. There was a transfer of righteousness. And there was a transfer of guilt to another. This is that love of infinite gift. You see, hope lies in this. Whether you have experienced infinite love in your life today, it's your only grounds for hope and comfort and a true life of peace and fullness. Michelle's life displays it to you today. Will you grasp onto it? Leave here today with a better life because of the life of Michelle and Rathkamp. We're going to now close this service with prayer. And if it's your tradition to do such prayer, I invite you to, as we pray, let us close this time now together. Father in heaven, we thank you for this service, this time of remembrance. I thank you for Maureen and her great love for her sister, her mother, the great work she's done in putting this all together. Bless her. Bless Cheryl. Give her comfort during this time of loss and loss. Give her peace. We pray now that you will go with all of these families and these people which have been touched by Michelle's life, and that her memory will never be lost, and that they will be able to commune together over a meal, remembering all of your choice benefits. And we now ask that you will now close this time, giving us that hope in which we desire to have from infinite love. We ask these things in Christ's name. Amen. I want to relay an announcement on behalf of the family. Soon these doors will be opened up, and there will be seating arrangements and food galore. We invite you to share a meal on behalf of Michelle and her memory. But if you're not able to make it, we understand. And we ask that you do please take, the family has spent countless hours making bags of remembrances for Michelle. We pray that you will take one of those if you cannot stay for a meal. Take one of those, please, to remember her and to remember this time that we shared together. You are dismissed. Thank you.